When did you let love blind you to a dangerous mistake? I wish I could say I wasn't the kind of person to let a desperate plea from someone I once loved blind me, but then again that would be a lie. My brother Dylan 48M had always called it my Achilles heel, this almost pathological need to be there for people, especially when they were at their lowest. He'd hammered it into me since we were kids, ever since Harold Ramirez 53M tried to rescue a stray cat that ended up giving me stitches and a tetanus shot. That same impulse, years later, found me staring at a crumpled utility bill, my stomach churning with a fear far colder than any winter chill seeping through the old cabin walls. I knew with an awful certainty that I was about to make a monumental mistake, or perhaps was already deep in the middle of one. The cabin itself, nestled deep in the Maine woods, was supposed to be my sanctuary. Place where the only significant decisions involved whether to chop more firewood or simply reread a dusty paperback. Dylan, with his meticulously planned life and an investment portfolio that made mine look like pocket change, had begrudgingly helped me with the down payment a few years back, under the strict proviso that I stop letting people walk all over me. Harold. I'd tried, I really had. But then Donna 37F called. Her voice, even over a crackly cell signal that barely penetrated the tree cover, was still capable of sending a jolt through me. It had been years, almost a decade, since our tumultuous relationship had imploded, leaving me with a surprisingly large emotional crater and a significant dent in my savings account. Back then, she was a whirlwind of unpredictable energy, a chaotic force that always promised excitement but delivered chaos. Our breakup had been messy, a series of dramatic accusations and tearful apologies, mostly on her end. I'd spent the better part of my late 40s trying to unscramble my life from the tangled mess she'd left behind. My therapist, a patient woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, had gently guided me through the process of setting boundaries, something I'd never quite mastered. But the moment Donna's number flashed on my screen, all those hard-won lessons felt like they were written in sand. Harold. Oh God, Harold, it's really you, Shed sobbed, the sound raw and desperate. I didn't know who else to call. Everyone else. They've abandoned me. It was the classic Donna playbook. Isolate herself, then reach out to the one person she knew would respond, driven by some misguided sense of chivalry. My initial instinct was to hit end call to protect the fragile peace I'd built here in the quiet solitude. But that loyalty, that damn loyalty kicked in. The one that Dylan so derisively called my doormat tendency. She spun a tale of woe that was almost comically elaborate. A bad business deal, a shady partner who vanished with all her money, eviction notices piling up, a series of unfortunate health incidents, even a beloved pet needing emergency surgery. It was a symphony of misfortunes, each note perfectly pitched to pluck at my heartstrings. I could almost hear Dr. Carter's voice in my head, reminding me about emotional manipulation. But then Donna mentioned a mutual friend, Sarah, who confirmed some vague details of her current difficulties, enough to lend a veneer of truth to the whole thing. Sarah, bless her well-meaning but naive heart, had always been a sucker for Donna's dramatics too. I just need somewhere to stay, Harold, Shed pleaded, her voice dropping to a whisper, just for a little while, until I can get back on my feet. I promise I won't be any trouble. I'll just exist quietly. And here I was, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the bare winter trees, contemplating the offer I'd made. I'd told her she could stay in the guest cottage, a small insulated structure behind the main cabin. It had its own tiny kitchenette and bathroom, offering some semblance of separate living, which I figured was crucial for my sanity. I rationalized it to myself. She was desperate. She was family in a way, or at least a significant part of my past. It was an act of kindness. A good person would help. Dylan, of course, had reacted exactly as I'd predicted. I'd called him the day after Donna arrived, convinced that telling him would somehow lessen the impact of my decision, diffuse his inevitable anger. You did what? His voice, usually calm and measured, practically vibrated through the phone line. Harold, are you insane? Donna, the same Donna who cleaned out your checking account, maxed out your credit cards, and then ghosted you for 6 months. It wasn't like that, Dylan, I mumbled, even though it was exactly like that. She was in a bad place, and she's changed. She seems different, or just better at the performance, Dylan scoffed. There was a pause, and I could almost picture him running a hand over his impeccably styled hair, a gesture he often made when dealing with my perceived foolishness. Look, Harold, I get it. You want to believe the best in people. You always have. But some people, they don't change. They just refine their technique. You're lucky this cabin is so remote. At least she can't do too much damage out there. He was right, of course, about the remoteness. The nearest town was a good hour's drive, and the closest neighbor was a crusty old survivalist named Jade who owned a pack of vicious-looking dogs. But even as Dylan spoke, I felt a familiar defensiveness rising within me. He always saw things in black and white, success or failure, profit or loss. He struggled to understand the messy, illogical, emotional landscape that often dictated my own choices. Dylan had worked himself to the bone his entire life, pulling himself up by his bootstraps, always pragmatic, always 10 steps ahead. He'd never really understood why I valued loyalty over logic, or why I'd chosen a career as a high school history teacher when I could have, as he often reminded me, done so much more with my intellect. He saw my empathy as a weakness, an open door for exploitation. For the first few days, Donna was exactly as Shed promised, quiet, almost ethereal. She kept to the guest cottage, emerging only for carefully scheduled meals during which she was demure, almost apologetic. She spoke in soft tones, her eyes wide and mournful. She complimented my cooking, my choice of books, even the way the morning light hit the snow-covered trees. It was the complete opposite of the Donna I remembered, the one who would pick fights over the thermostat settings or criticize my choice of music. This new Donna seemed fragile, broken, in need of gentle care. I found myself feeling protective again, a familiar, dangerous warmth spreading through my chest, Maybe, just maybe, Dylan was wrong. Maybe people could change. Then slowly, subtly, the old Donna began to resurface. It started with small things. An offhand comment about how the guest cottage was a bit drafty, or how she really needed to get back to the city to sort out her affairs but just couldn't manage the drive herself. She'd ask for small favors, a ride to the nearest grocery store, a loan of my car for just an hour, a few bucks for emergency supplies. My innate desire to help, coupled with her innocent-sounding requests, made it hard to say no. I found myself making excuses for her. She was under stress. She was rebuilding, she needed a little push. One cold afternoon, a week after her arrival, I found her in my study, a room I usually kept locked because it contained personal documents and my old, barely used desktop computer. The door was ajar and she was standing by my desk, her back to me, holding something. My blood ran cold. "Donna," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She jumped, dropping whatever she was holding onto the desk with a clatter. She spun around, her face flushed, eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place, guilt. "Fear, Harold, oh I am so sorry," she stammered, wringing her hands. "I was just looking for a book. I thought you had some biographies in here. I didn't realize it was private." My gaze fell to the desk. There next to my monitor lay a crumpled piece of paper. It was the utility bill for the cabin, still mostly folded, but enough of it was visible for me to make out my name, my address, and the account number. My stomach lurched. The bill hadn't even come yet. I'd simply printed it off the online portal that morning to check the usage. It wasn't something she should have seen, let alone been holding. "A book?" I asked, my voice flat. "In my study. I keep my books in the living room, Donna, you know that." She avoided my gaze, picking nervously at a loose thread on her sweater. I wasn't thinking. I'm so out of sorts lately. Everything's just overwhelming." Her lower lip trembled and she looked up at me, her eyes glistening. It was the same look she used to give me when she was caught doing something she shouldn't have, a look that always managed to disarm my anger. I sighed, the tension slowly draining from me, replaced by a familiar weariness. Maybe she was right. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. This remote cabin probably felt like a prison after her fast-paced city life. It was a stupid bill after all. What did it matter if she saw it? "It's all right," I said, trying to sound more forgiving than I felt. "Just try not to go into rooms that are closed off, okay? I have some personal things in here." "Of course, Harold," she whispered, her voice meek. "I understand. I really am so sorry." She backed away from the desk, giving it a wide berth as if it suddenly contained a venomous snake. Later that evening, after Shed retreated to the guest cottage, I found myself replaying the incident in my mind. The way Shed jumped, the way Shed immediately reached for the overwhelmed card. It didn't quite sit right. My loyalty, usually a comforting blanket, suddenly felt like a heavy shroud. The next morning, I drove to the nearest small town for supplies. It was a bright, crisp day, the kind that usually lifted my spirits, but a sense of unease gnawed at me. As I pulled into the parking lot of the general store, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dylan. "Hey Harold, just got off the phone with Mom. She's worried about you. Heard you've got a guest out there. Just want to make sure you're being careful. Remember what happened last time. Call me." I stared at the message, a knot tightening in my stomach. My mother, bless her heart, was an inveterate worrier, and Dylan was clearly feeding her concerns. He really didn't trust Donna, not one bit. And seeing his message, I had to admit, a sliver of that distrust began to creep into my own thoughts. I didn't call him back immediately. Instead, I went into the store, picked up my usual provisions, and then, on an impulse I couldn't quite explain, walked over to the small, dusty post office counter tucked in the back. There was a notice board there, covered in local flyers, missing pets, yard sales, babysitting ads. My eyes scanned the notices, looking for nothing in particular, when something snagged my attention. A small, printed flyer, almost hidden behind a brightly colored ad for a local maple syrup festival. It was a basic black and white print, clearly homemade, with a grainy picture of a woman. Her face was blurry, but there was something familiar about her features, the shape of her jaw, the way her hair framed her face. Beneath the picture, in bold, stark letters, read, "Warning, identity theft alert. If you have any information regarding this individual, please contact." And below that, a phone number and a name, Sarah Jenkins. Sarah, the mutual friend Donna had mentioned. The one who had confirmed Donna's woes. My heart hammered against my ribs. It couldn't be. Sarah would never be involved in something like this. But the picture. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my old contacts, and found Sarah's number. My fingers hovered over the call button, an icy dread spreading through me. This was it. This was the moment where my loyalty was truly put to the test. And the more I stared at that flyer, the more convinced I became that I was about to stumble into a truth far more terrifying than a mere toxic ex could ever unleash. My fingers hovered over Sarah's number, a phantom chill creeping up my arm. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the general store, the faint scent of stale coffee and damp wood, all receded into a distant drone. All I could see was that blurry image, that stark warning. Sarah. The kind, trusting Sarah. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the image of the woman on the flyer with the Donna I knew, the Donna who was currently back at my cabin, ostensibly recuperating. It seemed impossible, a cruel joke. And yet the unease that had been building since she arrived, the subtle shifts in her behavior, the way she'd been in my study, it all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. My loyalty, usually my shield, now felt like a blindfold that had just been ripped away. I couldn't call Sarah from here, not in the middle of a busy post office, not with the possibility that what I suspected was true, that my friend might be a victim. I needed privacy. I needed to think. Shoving my phone into my pocket, I quickly paid for my groceries, my mind racing. The drive back to the cabin felt endless, the familiar winding road suddenly claustrophobic. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see some unknown danger materialize. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the cabin looked peaceful, deceptively so. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney of the guest cottage. Donna was inside, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. Or perhaps not oblivious at all. My stomach churned with a mixture of fear, betrayal, and a deep, mortifying embarrassment. How could I have been so blind, so foolish? Dylan's words, "You just refined their technique," echoed in my ears, mocking me. I carried the groceries inside, my movements stiff and deliberate. I put them away, each item placed with a precision born of raw nerves. Then I sat at my kitchen table, pulling out my phone. I stared at Sarah's number for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the call button. This wasn't just about Donna anymore. This was about Sarah, about protecting someone else from whatever dark game Donna was playing. My loyalty had always been a reactive force, a pull towards a desperate plea. Now, for the first time, it felt like an active decision, a line I had to draw. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I pressed dial. It rang twice before Sarah's cheerful voice answered. "Hello, Sarah. It's Harold Ramirez," I said, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. There was a slight pause. "Harold, oh wow, it's been ages. How are you? Everything okay?" Her voice was friendly, a little surprised, completely unaware. It made what I had to do even harder. "Sarah," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I'm calling because, well, I saw something today in town at the post office, a flyer." A beat of silence. Then her voice tinged with a sudden wariness. "A flyer? What kind of flyer, Harold?" "An identity theft alert," I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "With your name on it and a picture. It looked a lot like Donna." The silence on the other end stretched, becoming thick and suffocating. I could almost hear Sarah's breath hitch. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, stripped bare of its usual cheer. You saw that?" "Yes," I confirmed, my heart sinking further. "Sarah, what's going on? Has she done something to you?" A choked sob escaped her. "Oh, Harold, I knew it. I knew she'd come for you next. I should have warned you. I really should have." Her voice cracked with genuine distress. "She came to me months ago, similar story to what I imagined she spun for you. Said she was homeless, broke, desperate. I tried to help her. Lent her some money, let her stay with me for a bit. She got access to my mail, my documents, everything. Before I knew it, she'd opened lines of credit in my name, drained my bank account, even changed my address on some of my bills. When I confronted her, she vanished. I tried to cover it up at first out of shame, but it got so bad. My credit is ruined. I'm facing legal action from creditors. I had to go to the police. They told me to put out those flyers, warn people." My mind raced back to Donna's elaborate tale of woe, her mutual friend Sarah confirming details. It wasn't confirmation. It was a clever ploy, using Sarah's real misfortune as a veneer of truth for her own lies, probably gleaned from the very documents she'd stolen. My stomach churned, not just from anger, but from the cold realization of how deeply I'd been manipulated, and how close I'd come to being the next victim, or perhaps already was. The utility bill, the way she'd clutched it. "Sarah, she's here," I confessed, the words tasting like ash. "She's at my cabin. She's been here for a week." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Harold, you need to be careful. She's dangerous. She's desperate. The police said she's done this to multiple people, always the same MO. She finds someone trusting, vulnerable. She feeds them a sob story, gets close, then strikes. She's a professional." Professional. Dylan's words about refining her technique came back again. He wasn't just being cynical, he was warning me about a genuine threat. "What should I do, Sarah?" I asked, feeling utterly lost. "She's in my guest cottage. I don't know how to handle this." "You need to call the police, Harold," Sarah urged, her voice firm despite her distress. "Immediately, tell them everything. They'll know what to do. Do not confront her yourself. Just get her out of there. And check all your accounts, Harold, everything." I thanked Sarah, promising to keep her updated, and hung up, my hand shaking. The weight of betrayal, of knowing I had allowed this person back into my life, settled heavily on my shoulders. I was not just a naive old fool, I was now potentially a victim, and worse, a complicit enabler providing sanctuary for a criminal. The shame was suffocating. My first impulse was to call Dylan. He would have known, he would have seen through it. But then a stubborn resolve hardened within me. No, this was my asterisk mess. This was where I finally drew the line. This was where I stopped being the Harold who let others clean up his messes or dictate his actions. I stood up, walked to my study, and opened my laptop. I pulled up my online banking, my credit card statements, and even my utility accounts. My heart pounded as I scrolled through, looking for anything out of place. Nothing immediately screamed stolen. But then I remembered the crumpled utility bill. The one I'd printed that morning. I found it again, unfolded it. The account number was there. A pang of dread shot through me. She had it. She could have written it down. I took a deep breath. Okay, step 1, secure my finances. Step 2, call the police. Step 3, deal with Donna. My mind, usually prone to drifting into nostalgic reveries or philosophical musings, was suddenly sharp, focused, almost clinical. This was not a rescue mission. This was a damage control operation. I called the local sheriff's department. It took a while to explain the situation, the history with Donna, Sarah's warning, the flyer. The officer on the other end, a calm-sounding woman named Officer Miller, listened patiently. "Mr. Ramirez," she said, her voice professional, "this is a serious matter. We'll send a unit out to your cabin immediately. Do not confront her. Do not let her know you've called us. Just act normal. We'll handle the approach." It felt surreal, waiting for the police. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of the trees outside sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I considered leaving, but then rejected the idea. This was my home. I wasn't going to be driven out of it by someone who had preyed on my misguided loyalty. I made myself a cup of tea, trying to appear calm, even as my hands trembled slightly. An hour later, the distinct crunch of tires on my gravel driveway announced their arrival. 2 police cruisers, lights off, pulled up quietly. Officer Miller, a woman with kind but firm eyes, stepped out with a male colleague. I met them at the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Mr. Ramirez?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, leading them inside, explaining that Donna was in the guest cottage. We'll approach her. Stay here, please, and keep your phone ready. They walked towards the guest cottage, their movements efficient, practiced. I watched from my living room window, my breath held tight in my chest. They knocked, waited. The door opened. I saw Donna's face, initially confused, then her eyes widened, and a flash of something akin to terror crossed her features. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the conversation was brief. Donna went back inside, emerged moments later with a small duffel bag. She looked towards the main cabin, towards my window. Our eyes met across the snowy expanse. There was no apology, no tearful plea this time. Just a flicker of something unreadable, a cold calculation before she turned and was led to one of the cruisers. As the police cars drove away, the silence that settled over the cabin was profound, heavier than the winter air. It wasn't the peaceful silence I craved, but an empty, stark quiet. The confrontation, or lack thereof, had been strangely anticlimactic. No dramatic screams, no tearful goodbyes, just the quiet removal of a problem. I finally called Dylan. It's gone, I stated, my voice flat. The police took her. Identity theft. Sarah was a victim. I think I was about to be one too. There was a long pause on Dylan's end. I braced myself for the "I told you so." But it didn't come. Instead, his voice, when he finally spoke, was softer than it expected. "Harold," he said, and I could hear a note of genuine concern. "Are you okay? Is everything all right with your finances?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I've started checking everything." "But I don't think she got far." "Good," he said. "Look, I'm glad you called the police. That was the right move. I'll come up there tomorrow. We'll go through everything together. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." His offer surprised me. Dylan, the man who always kept an emotional distance, who saw my problems as self-inflicted wounds, was offering help. True help, not just criticism. It was a small shift, but it meant more to me than he could possibly know. 2 weeks later. The following weeks were a whirlwind of phone calls, paperwork, and the unsettling discovery of how truly vulnerable I had been. Dylan arrived the next day, true to his word. He didn't lecture. He simply sat beside me at my desk, meticulously going through my bank statements, credit card reports, utility bills, and anything else I could find. It turned out Donna had only managed a few small, almost undetectable attempts. A change of address request on a magazine subscription, a few online purchases of small items on a dormant credit card, an attempt to redirect a utility bill to her own email. Nothing substantial, thank God, because my vigilance and luck had stepped in just in time. She had clearly been laying the groundwork, just as Sarah had said. Dylan, for his part, was methodical and thorough. He helped me set up fraud alerts, change all my passwords, contact my banks, and even got me in touch with a cybersecurity expert he knew. He didn't say, "See, I told you so," not once. Instead, he just worked quietly, efficiently, and with a focused intensity that was, in its own way, comforting. We didn't talk much about Donna or my past mistakes. We just dealt with the present problem. During one evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Dylan nursing a rare glass of whiskey, he looked at me. "Harold," he began, his voice low, "I know I can be hard on you, about your generosity, but I just don't want to see you hurt. I know you mean well. You've always had a big heart." It was an olive branch, a rare moment of vulnerability from my pragmatic younger brother. I realized then that his constant criticism wasn't born of malice, but a misguided form of protection. He saw my loyalty as a vulnerability because he cared, and I in turn had always seen his practicality as a lack of emotional depth, failing to see it as his own way of navigating a world he perhaps found equally challenging in its own way. "I know, Dylan," I said, a wave of affection washing over me, "and I appreciate it, really. I think I'm finally learning the hard way as usual." He nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Good. Because you deserve better, Harold. You're a good man. You just need to learn to be a good man to yourself first." That sentiment resonated deeply. For years, I had defined myself by my usefulness to others, my ability to rescue or provide comfort. I saw my empathy as my greatest strength, but it had also been my greatest weakness, leaving me open to exploitation. This incident with Donna, while painful and humiliating, was forcing me to reevaluate what loyalty truly meant. It wasn't about blindly trusting or endlessly giving. It was about discerning who deserved that trust and where to draw the line to protect myself. The police investigation was ongoing. Sarah kept me updated. Donna had a string of previous victims, just as Sarah had said. It became clear that she was not just a toxic ex, but a deeply troubled individual with a pattern of predatory behavior. The idea of her undergoing significant character development in the traditional sense, a sudden realization and change, seemed less likely now. Instead, her development might be forced, a consequence of facing the legal repercussions of her actions. Perhaps for her, true change would only begin once she hit rock bottom, stripped of her ability to manipulate. And I, by taking action, had unwittingly contributed to that. It was a cold comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. 3 months had passed since. The cabin had slowly regained its sanctuary status. The silence was once again a comforting blanket, not a stark emptiness. The incident with Donna felt like a bad dream, one I was slowly waking up from. My finances were secure, my passwords updated, and my vigilance was now a permanent fixture. My relationship with Dylan had shifted subtly but significantly. He still offered pragmatic advice, but it was now tempered with a newfound understanding. He'd even confessed that watching me navigate this ordeal, finally taking charge, had given him a different perspective on my strength. He had seen me, not as the easily exploited older brother, but as someone capable of growth and resilience. He had also started opening up a bit more about the pressures of his own meticulously managed life, admitting that his constant need for control sometimes left him feeling isolated. Our conversations were no longer just about his critiques of my life. They were becoming a genuine dialogue between two brothers who were finally seeing each other for who they truly were. As for Donna, the last I heard was through Sarah. Donna had been charged with multiple counts of identity theft and fraud across several states. She was facing significant time. There was no tearful confession, no dramatic apology, just the cold, hard reality of the justice system. Part of me, the old Harold, felt a flicker of sadness, a fleeting wish that things could have been different for her. But the new Harold, the one who had finally learned to protect himself, knew that some people, like a raging forest fire, needed to be contained, not appeased. My loyalty now had boundaries. I sat on my porch watching the last vestiges of winter snow melt, revealing the vibrant green shoots of spring beneath. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I thought about Dr. Carter, my therapist. I hadn't called her immediately after the incident, feeling too ashamed. But I knew I would soon, not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to truly understand the patterns that had led me to this point, to build stronger foundations for my future. I was 53, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly growing up. I had shed the burdensome cloak of misguided loyalty, replacing it with a healthier understanding of self-preservation and discerning trust. The journey wasn't over. I knew I would still face challenges, still be tempted by the siren call of someone in need. But now I had a compass, an internal guide that pointed me not just towards kindness, but towards healthy boundaries. The remote cabin, once a symbol of my retreat from the world's complexities, was now a quiet testament to my own quiet revolution. I had stopped being a doormat, and in doing so had finally started to walk my own path.